Associate Professor of Communication Dan Koger. We are in the Thomas D. Clark Reading Room of the Katie Murrell Library for Lindsey Wilson Conversations. The way this works is you get to select a topic that you want to discuss while enjoying a beverage of your choice. The beverage you've chosen is decaf coffee, and the topic is W.e.b. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folks. Who was W.e.b. Du Bois?
Well, W.e.b. Du Bois was a famous sociologist, criminologist, and thinker. He was the son of freed black people in Massachusetts, born in 1868, graduated from Fisk University at the age of 20 in 1888, then entered Harvard and got a bachelor's degree in Harvard, and then studied sociology at the University of Berlin and worked with a number of the famous sociologists in that country. And then came back and entered the PhD program in sociology at Harvard and graduated in 1895, the first black to receive a PhD from Harvard. And I said to begin to understand it is helpful for you to keep some historical dates in mind. The first is 1619. That was the year the first African slaves were imported into what is now the United States. The next date is 1776, which of course is the year from which American people date their origin as a unified nation. The next date is 1865, the year the Civil War ended, and the final date is today, 2009. So here's the arithmetic. Subtract the year of the arrival of the first African slaves to our shores in 1619 from the year the Civil War ended in 1865, and you get 246 years. The time that slavery existed on our soil is a formal, structured, and integral portion of all or part of the American economic, political, and social systems. Next, subtract 1776 from 2009, and you get 233 years, the length of time we've been a nation. What these numbers mean is that African Americans were formally enslaved in this country for 13 years longer than the United States has been a nation. And that's the calculating the end of slavery from 1865. Many, including Du Bois, argue justifiably that the end of the Civil War most definitely did not mark the end of oppression and merciless exploitation of this enduring race of people. This is a voice from an incredibly tumultuous period in the history of this nation. And if we're going to be successfully functioning citizens, more of us better come to some understandings of who we are as a country. It isn't just the Revolution, the Civil War, World War II, and right now. But there's a lot of subtle, nuanced things that have been going on, and the American people need to get into the business of understanding more of history. He says that way back in the days of bondage, they thought to see in one divine event the end of all doubt and disappointment, they being the black folks. Few men ever worshiped freedom with half such unquestioning faith as did the American Negro for 2 centuries. To him, so far as he thought and dreamed, slavery was indeed the sum of all villainies, the cause of all sorrow, the root of all prejudice. Emancipation was the key to all promised land of sweeter beauty than ever stretched before the eyes of weary Israelites. In song and exhortation swelled in one refrain, liberty. In his tears and curses, the God he implored had freedom in his right hand. At last it came, suddenly, fearfully, like a dream. With one wild carnival of blood and passion came the message of his own plaintive cadences. Shout, O children, shout, you're free, for God has brought your liberty. The nation has not yet found the peace from its sins. The freed man has not yet found in freedom his promised land. Whatever of good may come in these years of change, the shadow of a deep disappointment rests upon the Negro people. A disappointment all the more bitter because the unattained ideal was unbounded save by the simple ignorance of a lowly people. They waited for 200 years to be freed. Were then freed, their expectations, having no skills except manual labor. They had to learn about money. They had to learn about being families because families were broken up and sold. The depth and horror of the slave period is virtually incomprehensible, and yet here these people were with the shining light of emancipation. Emancipation came, but it was only the start of the next chapter of these people who had been denied freedom for 246 years. But it's been slow, steady progress. What strikes me is African Americans had to learn so much after 246 years of essentially having all their humanity removed, and that they were something along the lines of an ox or something in the minds of people because the culture had created that system. And I got to tell you, I think it's one of the great strengths of this nation that look at what we have accomplished.
Associate Professor of Communication Dan Koger, thank you for joining us for Lindsey Wilson Conversations.
Thank you.